Welcome to the Shift Method Podcast. I'm your host, Coach D. My goal is to shift the culture of health and fitness through evidence-based coaching and engaging content for the public and health fitness professionals alike. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you all enjoy this episode.
What's good, everyone? Coach Damien here with the Shift Method Podcast. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. By the time this comes out, it's going to be Monday, February 19th. Happy Valentine's Day, y'all. Or happy International Singles Day, whatever it is for you if you're out there. But hope if you do have a significant other or with friends, y'all got to have a nice time, a nice relaxing time to kind of just celebrate, hanging out with people. This episode is going to be on some more research. So last time we were on the pod, we had Elias Figueroa, Coach Elias, come on and talk a little bit about his journey, a little bit about his work, and how he's going to be working towards his PhD here in fall of 2024. With me, I have someone that I think I've known now for probably coming up on maybe 3 years, 2 years at least, I want to say, right? Yeah, 2 years, I think. But really, really awesome guy who's, again, kind of with the data-driven strength team and over in the exercise science lab at Florida Atlantic University. And that is my man, Jake Remmert. Jake, do you mind introducing yourself to the people, please?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is super cool. I always love doing this kind of thing. It's really fun, and even more so with a very cool guys such as yourself, who,
Thank
like
you.
you
Thank
said,
you.
we're friends outside of this, right? So that always makes it easier. So yeah, I guess you kind of hit the main things, right? Like coaching with data-driven strength, doing my PhD currently at FAU, so a lot of time spent in the lab there, doing cool. Well, I was gonna say strength and hypertrophy stuff, but these days it's mostly just hypertrophy stuff. We'll have some strength stuff in there, relatively soon, I'm sure, but my focus is more muscle growth. It's just what I like, so that's what we're doing. And yeah, man, I don't know. If anyone's watching the video version of this, you can see I'm a huge nerd, so that's always fun to talk about. But yeah, I guess that's me.
Yes, sir. I feel like when I was a participant for y'all, and then just like in general, when I would like be around the lab, I feel like that was like our go-to bonding thing, man. It's like you got the Naruto tattoos. If you're
Yeah,
watching, you can see he's got Goku in the back there. So we always got anime to talk about, man, which is awesome.
for sure, for sure.
Yes, sir. Okay, so obviously we're going to talk a little about research because, as you mentioned, Jake here, big in the field of research on the hypertrophy and strength side at Florida Atlantic University. But y'all know the deal here because Jake is a coach. I got to learn a little bit more about his coaching background and kind of what got him into fitness in general. So, Jake, I don't know if we've ever like personally had this talk, but like for yourself as like an individual, like what was like your catalyst for getting involved in fitness? Was it just something you got into through like gym class? Was it like parents? Like what got you to be active first and foremost for yourself?
You know what's funny? I'm kind of that generation where I grew up, like I literally can't remember. I don't know if I have earlier memories before seeing Dragon Ball Z on TV for the first time. I was so little.
That was one of
So
my first
like,
cartoons too, man.
yeah, that guy back there, him and Vegeta were like, I just remember watching, I just liked the show, right? But it really spoke to me, like they're out here, they're working out, they're training, they're doing push-ups or whatever, right? But they get bigger, they look awesome, they get
Yeah.
stronger, they can help their friends. Like it was just so cool. So I remember, watching that and I want to go do push-ups and sit-ups in the driveway or whatever. And then eventually that kind of continued into getting interested in sports growing up, primarily basketball, but I played a few other things as a kid. But then, wanting to try to be stronger for that, relatively short-lived, but with that specific motivation, like I eventually was like, let me just work on the skill-based things maybe a little bit more. Because to be honest, at the time, I was just bigger than everybody else, like, which is not a flex, I promise. I am no longer bigger than everybody else. I just grew really early.
Mm.
So I was between fifth and sixth grade, I grew almost a foot. I
Oh
was
wow.
like, well, I'm 5'11" now. I was 5'11" in sixth grade. Like
No
it was
shit.
it was cool, right?
Yeah.
So as a kid, I kind of had that physical advantage. So I was like, I don't really need to work out. But these days, I'm like, yeah, that would have helped a lot, but whatever. But anyway, so then after that, I kind of didn't do anything for a long time. And then became more of I would love to just look different,
Mhm.
right? Like, I was never bullied really, unfortunately, but at the same time, like I always had this slight discomfort, around, I just want to look a little bit different, or I just want to have a little bit less, softness about
Mhm.
my body. I want to have more muscle or whatever. And so that was kind of I guess the most, well, that's not the most recent one. The penultimate motivation, if you will,
Yeah.
that kind of got me like, okay, let me try to be more consistent with this. Let me try to figure something out. So I started with that and gradually built, and then I found out, oh, there's research about this. That's cool. What are these people saying? And just trying to find, there's probably a better and a worse way to do this. So let me try
Right.
to do it, in a better way. And sort of along the way, the more recent motivation that sort of grew from that process was uh, I'll get a little bit deep here, I guess, with the idea of like self-mastery and the
Mm,
idea of if I do these inputs, I can get a certain output, and I can manipulate things to get different outputs, and I can, different lifestyle things happen, schedule things. Okay, I can't do those. I have different constraints. How do I shift around and
yeah.
make it work? And I just found that really fun, and the process of doing that, in the process of learning more about myself and learning more about, what makes me tick in terms of what keeps me consistent, what keeps me engaged and enjoying what's going on, and then obviously what actually gets results, because that
Yeah.
matters too, of course. But just that idea of everything you learn about yourself along the way and about how you interface with other people and with the world,
Hmm.
like that is it, dude. And that is still the thing that's kind of stuck with me, as like almost like a spiritual process that I'm
Yeah.
like, man, this is cool. And it always is evolving. And, there's no endpoint, which I think, uh, it- you know, a handful of years ago, I would have been like, like I can't complete this thing, or I can't check the box or whatever. But now that's even more exciting because it can always change. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that I've kind of settled into that, because it feels a little bit more positive in some ways,
Yeah.
rather than trying to change how you look. More it's, growing in other ways. So yeah, there you go.
Absolutely, man. I heard a quote the other day. I apologize. I don't remember who it's from, but it was something along the lines of the reward is in the work, not the end result.
Mm,
And so
I like
like,
that.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you said, like you're chasing a goal. And of course you hit benchmarks, right? First time hitting 225 on bench as a
Yeah.
young man, you're like, yeah, or like noticing quad definition or like getting a number of pull-ups, right? Those things are all cool and tangible, achievable things. But then it's like, what's the next thing? What's
Yeah.
the next thing? And like you said, the people who as a coach personally, I find that stay with it the longest and end up having the most success are those who fall in love with and enjoy the process of it. Yes, celebrations along the way, but there's no really endpoint. It's a lifestyle, man. We were just talking
Yeah.
about my grandmother a little bit beforehand, how she's someone who's been a lifelong exerciser. She's 74. She didn't reach a goal and stop, and it's like, I'm done. No, it's you carry on through the rest of your life, man.
Yeah. I love how you said that too. Like, I think that's such a when we talk about the long game and the process and all that, I think some people, and myself included, for a long time, like we get almost too much in that side where it's all about delayed gratification,
Yes.
to the point where like we never actually get to the gratification part, and then
100%.
you get burned out and you don't want to do it anymore because it's not fun, right? So I love how you said that about like we still have to celebrate those things along the way, make sure we have some short-term things, moderate term things, whatever.
Absolutely, man. And I
Important.
really I never thought about it, but I can relate to you on this. I think Arnold is an inspiration to everyone, like myself included. Arnie's the god, he's the goat. But like growing up, seeing Goku, like you said, Vegeta, and seeing all these like basically superheroes, demigods, if you will, it
Hmm.
is inspiring. It is kind of one of those things where it's like, I want to be fit, I want to be jacked, I want to have huge pecs like
Yeah,
Goku when I grow up, right? So that's kind of funny that I've never really thought about it, but looking back now, I think that was definitely a catalyst for me as well.
I think so too. It's like I almost hesitate to bring it up because these days it's like it's anime is so trendy, right? And it's so
Yes,
like
we
which
were
is
here before it was cool.
yeah, right. Like we got made fun of, right?
Yeah.
But no, I don't want to, be the boomer or the back in my day whatever person, but so sometimes I almost hesitate to bring it up, not because I'm embarrassed, but just because I don't want people to think that I'm, the hipster. But like, who cares, dude? It's
Yeah.
cool. We grew up with it. Like, it just, I don't know. I feel like it inspired so many people, which is funny that I think a lot of people from the outside might not expect, people who watch anime from, that long. It's not current, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're making current stuff, but original Dragon Ball is very old.
I think it's the
And
80s, right? The
yeah,
mid to early 80s, I want to say.
yep. And then
Yeah.
like Z, I think was like kind of mostly 90s, early
Yeah.
2000s,
Yeah.
that stuff that like people who watch that and people who lift weights very, very seriously, like you wouldn't expect so much crossover, but there's a lot, you
I
know?
feel like every person I've come to learn who's like seriously into lifting is seriously into anime. It's an
Yeah.
interesting blend. I never would have until I got more into lifting as I got into like college. I was like, huh. I would have never expected that lifters are just a bunch of like nerds, like you said,
Yeah.
just a bunch of
I, wo-
nerds.
I wonder
Stronger.
if I wonder if it's kind of about like a similar working on yourself to achieve a thing
Mm,
kind of motivation, right? Like that's so many, especially like shonen stuff. It's Naruto, Demon Slayer, like all
yeah, yeah,
these
yeah.
new things now too are like it's the kid who's kind of weak and he's not able to help his friends yet, so he trains really hard, gets stronger, and now he saves the day. Right. And
Yes.
that's I think that's sort of the same thing a lot of us are trying to
It's a
do in the
relatable
gym.
story too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's dope, man. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Now, what does train? I haven't talked to you about this too recently. I know we've talked about it like on trips we've been on before, but what is your current training kind of looking like? Are you training for a show? Or are you training just for general health? Like what are you doing these days?
Yeah, so I am now thankfully just over a year removed from hernia surgery.
That's right.
So that derailed most of 2023 in terms of lower body stuff. But I'm now far enough away. I'm 100%. We're good. Everything's normal. Thank goodness. So now, what I've been doing recently is basically building my capacity back up, right? Just to be able to handle volume and load and all that. I've gotten that back up to a normal place. So what I'm doing currently is sort of kind of chilling, right? Like I'm training like 4 days a week right now, 2 upper days, 2 lower days, not very high volume, right? It's just kind of chill because there is, you know, not a ton of evidence to be fair, but a little bit that hints at maybe we can resensitize a little bit to the stimulus,
Hmm.
which I think fits with coaching experience, right? We see people who don't do a certain thing for a long time, we come back to it and it's like, oh, cool,
Yeah.
this is fast progress. So it would make sense if that's the case. And I think worst case scenario is you just get a little break and
Yeah.
it's a neutral thing, right? So that's what I've been trying to do is just kind of chill a little bit. I actually just have been emailing back and forth with my coach from my last. He coached me for years, man, and I've been away from him for a couple of years now just to save some money, frankly. But I literally was typing an email to him before we got on this call of getting things in line to start back up here because the goal is now to compete in bodybuilding by the end of this year,
Yeah.
aiming for September, October kind of time
Nice.
frame. So I'm excited. We tried to prep back in end of 2019, early 2020, and
Yep.
we all know what happened in March of 2020.
Yep.
And so I wasn't able to complete the mission, but trying to come back this year and finish it out. So that's the goal is right now we're chilling, maybe resensitize a little bit, but at the worst case, I'm just in a really good starting point to kind of push and then should be maybe a week or two from now or something, I think is when we're planning on starting back up
Nice.
with coaching. So then we'll, I don't know if you or any of your listeners are familiar with Ryan Doris, but he's the man first and foremost, but he is a when he hasn't competed in quite some time, but when he was competing, one of the best bodybuilders in the world.
Okay.
And he's kind of he's similar to me in some ways, or I guess I should say I'm similar to him in some ways because I learned from him about, you come up originally training, it's a lot of just the bro whatever stuff right before you learn
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah.
Then you learn all the science and all the, best practices and you do that. And then the more you do that, the more you're like, this has limitations too, and the bros are right about some stuff, right?
Yes.
So then you
Yes.
start to pull some, and you get this really nice hybrid, and so that's where he's at, and he's, uh, what we learned before working together was that I can handle a lot of volume and recover really well. So I'm probably gonna get blasted here pretty soon, which
Hell
is
yeah.
exciting. It'll be fun. But
The
yeah,
mass.
that's starting that soon. Prepping the rest of this year, probably start the diet in like April-ish is the thought there. And yeah, then we'll survive hopefully and see how it goes.
Hell yeah, man. The masochist me gets excited for you to hear that. It's nice to hear that you can tolerate a lot of volume. It's sad for whatever genetics, or whatever. I need volume or else nothing fucking changes at all. Like, the minimum of roughly 10 sets per week, give or take. Yeah,
Mhm.
that doesn't work for me, unfortunately. I gotta go
Oh yeah, yeah.
20-ish or higher a little bit. And
That's
I got
wild.
most, yeah, it's annoying, dude, especially for like certain areas like my chest. Calves are
Hmm.
just team no calves till the day I
Calves are
die,
calves,
but
man.
it's all good. But chest, I got a blast. Back is relatively good with maintenance, but like there's just certain things. It's like, well, guess I'm gonna grind myself into the ground for 90 minutes here to hopefully get some kind of response.
Yeah. That's the thing too, right? It just takes so much time. Like I love training, but we're busy, man.
I've
Like
had to superset. I know it's not the most efficient thing for hypertrophy, but it's nice for a little bit of like generalized conditioning, especially on like a lower
for
body
sure.
session. And it just, yeah, otherwise I'd be in the gym for 90 minutes every session. So I'm like, might as well superset at this point.
There you go. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, man. And that's, do you know where, if you're going to compete in September, where it's going to be at?
No, so usually there's quite a bit of stuff in South Florida. So usually I've been looking at stuff to actually have my list right next to me that I can read this off
Hell
verbatim.
yeah.
So this year there's stuff scheduled um, for 2024 already in Gulfport, wherever that is in Florida. Um, Palm Beach, Tampa, Deltona. Like there's quite a few things in September,
Nice.
October range. There is a couple other things that are reasonable travel distance. Like I'm not trying to fly to Kentucky to,
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
But anyway, so there's that stuff. And then as the year goes on, they'll announce more things. And so usually there's more stuff in Miami and in Orlando and
Right. Right.
reasonable distance. The tricky thing is also like what federation do you want to do and all that. So we'll have to cross that bridge at some point. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And what do you plan on doing? Men's physique or which
we're doing
category?
bodybuilding, bro.
Bodybuilding?
That's
Okay.
I absolutely I know this is weird because a lot of people whenever I say that maybe the way that I said that I hope it doesn't come off as like elitist. But I know a lot of people are quick to kind of be like, or you're hating on men's physique. I think men's physique is awesome, right? Like I think that and bikini have gotten so many more people interested in the sport,
Mhm.
if we want to call it a sport, that is amazing for like the whole as a whole, right? It's
Right.
awesome. For me, I number one, I just destroy myself training legs too often. I gotta show them off, right? Even if they're not huge, I gotta at least show it. And then two, I'm like the sort of like what we talked about before, like the almost spiritual self-work side of this whole thing. Like that's what bodybuilding is about to me. And the process of getting that lean is a big piece of that, right? It's sort
Yeah.
of the self-imposed, really difficult situation that really makes you learn a lot about yourself. And I'm like, you just have to get leaner to do bodybuilding compared to physique,
Yeah.
at least in the natural realm. The untested guys still get crazy lean for men's physique. But yeah, so I'm just like, I want those last handful of weeks, those last few pounds to come off just to see what that feels like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which sounds a little bit weird and like you said, masochistic, but hey, that's
That's
what we're
part of
here
the
for.
art. That's part of the
Yeah.
art, man. Super, super cool. I'm excited for you. And hopefully if
Thanks,
it's
dude.
nearby, I might try and pop by and see you on the
For
stage. That'd be
sure.
really dope,
Yeah.
man.
I'm a few years ago they had one in Boca
Oh,
that
no shit.
yeah, so
Okay.
I would love it if they had something that's, close
Palm
enough
Beach
that
ain't that far either, though. That's like a
no.
45-minute drive north.
Yeah.
Not
I
that
would
bad.
love to have a crew there. Selfishly like the support would be awesome, but we'll make it. At that point I'm half brain dead anyway, right? So
Yeah,
we'll
right.
be all right.
Like, who's saying my name? What?
Yeah.
Cool, man. And now, so how did you then, so you fall in love with working out from, childhood influence, getting involved in sports, all that good stuff, the bodybuilding bug bit you. How do you get into coaching then others? What was that journey like?
This is gonna sound really funny, but so I very quick background. I promise this will be a short tangent.
No, don't rush at all.
That so I graduate high school, right? And this is sort of in my middle downtime where I'm not really lifting. I'm just kind of, going about life. And I don't know if this is normal or abnormal, but in my high school it was kind of we were generally geared towards either nursing or engineering. Those were like the things they were kind of pushing you towards
Oh, wow. Was it like a
for
magnet school program
no,
or they just
it
had
was
this
just sort of what
how
they
it worked
yeah, it was
out?
just sort of how it
Okay.
went. And so I was like, okay, well, given the choices, I guess I'll do engineering. My dad's an engineer, like okay, cool. So and I was always really good with math and physics and that stuff. So we'll go that route. So I start going to college. I'm a semester in. I'm doing well in the classes, but I absolutely hate it. It's just not fun at all. I feel so lost and just ugh. So I actually dropped out of school and for like 4 years, I just worked full-time retail, hated it, but I had to pay rent somehow,
Of
right?
course.
So we're doing that. Somewhere in the middle there is where I kind of rediscovered lifting again, to where I was like, I'm unhappy with how I'm feeling in my own skin, and I just want to look a little different. And let me try this again. I used to lift a little bit. Let me, and then pretty quickly it was like, oh, I can learn, there's a better way to do this. I can do these things, and all of a sudden now I'm reading articles all the time, back when those were a thing, blogs and stuff, right?
T Nation, baby.
Yeah. There you go. YouTube videos,
Yeah.
podcasts, constantly everything. It just consumed me, right?
Hmm.
And I remember being like, when I dropped out of school, I said to myself and to my parents, because I had to, tell them that I was like, once I know what I want to do, I will go back to school if that's required for the job. So I just remember I was so consumed by learning about lifting, and I was like, can I do this? Like, can I, make this a job? How do you do that? Personal trainer. So I went and got a personal training certification, and I was like, this is going to sound really bad. And I really hope that this doesn't get me yelled at, but I just remember being a little bit underwhelmed like in the required knowledge, right? Just
Oh,
not saying that it
you're
doesn't
preaching to the
require a lot of
choir, dude.
knowledge.
No, it's a
Yeah.
test that you have to memorize silly things, and each organization has their silly things you need to remember. And personally, a lot of the stuff in there, no offense, is outdated, or when you apply it practically doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
Like the anatomy and physiology stuff, and some of like the even like psychology and rapport building, phenomenal. Like ACE, I
Yeah.
can't say enough nice things about it. But then you get into some of the program design, and you're like, I'm supposed to be foam rolling and doing glute bridges for 6 weeks. Like, what?
Yeah.
We need to move, you know?
Right. 100%. Yeah. So, okay, it's not just me. So
No, no,
I
no, not
was
at all,
I
buddy.
was like, I want more, and I just remember having this nagging thought of like, if I'm working with some client and they ask me why we're doing something, I want to have the answer, right?
Mm,
And I want to be able to, like, if they keep asking why, I can keep going deeper and deeper. I just want to know.
yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I want to learn more about this. Let me maybe do a bachelor's degree or something, right? I'll finally go back to school like I said I would. And then pretty quick, and this is, mind you, like, this is a quick process, right? Like, I was getting pretty ahead of myself, which luckily has worked out well. But I was moving pretty quick with this stuff, and I remember, like everybody, you start lifting and you start finding people on Instagram who have a great physique, that's who you follow, right?
Yep.
And you do what they say or whatever, because they look great. And I stumbled across this dude named Nick Cheadle, who was luckily, he was putting out great information, right? I'm not sure if he still does stuff anymore or not, but at the time it was great, and he looked fantastic, super strong, jacked, lean, the whole thing. And so I stumbled across pretty good information early on, and probably a month after I was following him, he made a post about my coach Lane Norton has me doing this. So I
Mm.
was like, oh, he has a coach. His coach probably knows even more than him. Let's look at this dude. So I found Lane Norton right away, who, I know you are aware of, but for your listeners, right? Like, he's very, very smart dude. Very good source of information for all these things. And so I just looked into it, right? I looked into all this info, and that got me even more excited to learn more, and to, it put the idea in my head that people coach people online.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to be an in-person personal trainer, right? Which is an amazing job and super important. I actually tried it. I was like, oh, that's what I want to do, and my personality type just doesn't mesh with it super well. So originally, I was kind of disappointed. What am I gonna do? But then I was like, oh, you can do this online thing. So I was like, I want to do that, right? That's the job I want. And then I was like, well, I had the crushing realization, why would anyone listen to me? I'm just this random dude, right? I literally have been lifting for 3 months or whatever, right? Like, it's, and I don't have a degree, blah, blah, blah. So I started thinking about, once I found Lane, I started to kind of spider web out and find all these other people,
Hmm.
who were also really educated and making great content, and all that, great coaches. And I was like, well, what's consistent, right? Like, what's making people stand out? And some of it's just experience and,
Yeah, yeah.
client testimonials and all of that. But I was also like, a lot of these people have degrees, right? You see
Hmm.
master's degrees, you see PhDs. And I was like, I'm gonna get a PhD. That's how I'm gonna stand out to be an online coach,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous, right? Like, it's, you know, I want to be an online coach, so let me go do 10 years of very intense school. But thank goodness I found out that I love research along the way, and it's all worked out well. But that's kind of what got me into that idea of I want to do this. And I started, and I got through my undergrad, and sort of the last really the last year and a half of my undergrad is where I finally was able to convince a couple people in my local gym to give me a chance to start coaching them a little bit.
Yeah.
And things were going well, and I was trying to get testimonials, and it was so glacially slow, but like just trying, man, just trying so hard. And then actually I don't know if you're familiar with the JPS guys
Mhm.
out in
Yeah, yeah.
Australia, but they contacted me for some reason to write an article for their website.
No
And I was like,
way.
how do you even know I exist? This is crazy. But yeah, they asked me to do it, and they liked it, and I did that a couple times. And then Zach and Josh from Data Driven Strength were both. Zach was already at FAU for his
Mhm.
master's at the time. Me and Josh were both through the. I think at this point we were both through the application process. We were both getting ready to start, and so we were all going to be in the same lab. And that's when they asked me if I wanted to join up with them, and here we are, right? A couple years later already. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, man, it's weird to think back on how it all kind of started with like, I hate this retail job, and let me go get a PhD so I can coach people over the internet.
Retail's
And
brutal, man.
that's tough.
Thankfully, I've worked in like restaurants and a little bit of sales, but retail is I've heard hell from a lot of
It's
people.
tough. You gotta, luckily, so I was out on the sales floor for a long time, which is the worst part. And then I was able to move into the back room,
Nice.
which helped a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, people are great, but not all people are great.
Yes. Remind me so with the online coaching thing, what year is this when you start getting into like hearing about Lane Norton and thinking about online coaching? Because obviously it
Oh,
has a big
wow.
boom now, but like when were you like hearing and thinking about I want to be an online coach?
That must have been maybe like 2015 or something like that.
Nice. That was like kind
Um,
of when that's like pioneer years, man. That's dope. I know people
yes,
have been always doing it for a little bit, probably in like the 2010s. Maybe someone was doing the 2000s, but like
yeah,
that was like kind of I feel like the genesis of like more mainstream kind of thing. So that's pretty
yeah, it
cool.
was starting to pop off. Yeah, which is probably part of why I was drawn to it, right? To be honest, I start
Yeah.
seeing, you just the trade-off of you get access to more people, you have the whole world in front of you, but now
Hmm.
you also have a whole world of competition around
Exactly.
you. So big pros and cons. So yeah, but yeah, that is interesting. That I hadn't thought about that timing before you asked that, but yeah, that is really interesting timing.
Yeah, man. And I always like to ask coaches this, and you can apply it to like generalized people. You can apply it to, I know you work with a lot of like power lifters and strength and hypertrophy athletes, however you want to approach it. Do you kind of have like a philosophy around training or around coaching that you feel like is kind of stuck with you? Or just kind of like, this is something I find I always go back to as like my kind of foundation for my coaching?
Yeah. I when you when you first started to frame the question, I was just like, oh man, how do I answer this? But then I've kind of, you know, I think I do have a good answer, and that is that I a lot of what I do is modeled after my coach Ryan Doris, right? Because he's sort of he started out as my coach, became my mentor because I made it very clear. I was like, I want to do what you're doing. And so like I might ask you questions here and there. I hope that's okay. If it's not, let me know. But like I'm just gonna try to soak in what you're doing, right? Just learn what you're doing so that I can try to apply it. And thankfully he was very nice and answered some questions for me here and there. But the he sort of became my mentor over time with that, and we just became really good friends through the whole process, right? So he was very helpful. But I've so much of what I do is modeled after him, which is very we have the research that we have that's
Mhm.
helpful, gives us a good starting point, but that's kind of it, right? It's the starting point, and from there, now we're working with people, right? And
Mhm.
now the relationship is the thing that matters.
Yes.
And without that, we can do nothing, right? Like we have to be able to be open and honest with each other. We have to be able to give each other feedback if we need it, if something needs to, change or whatever. And after working with him, I was like, every client not every client, some people are just too busy, or they just want to do something else, which is fine.
Yeah.
But most people send me video check-ins every week, right? To where it feels so much more like talking to a human, right? I don't have to just read an email and it's so, I don't like sterile.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. That's a good way of
love,
putting it.
yeah, I really, it's, I'm struggling to put it into words clearly, but I'm like that relationship is everything, dude. And you get such a good feel for like what's going on in somebody's life, what kind of mood they're in,
Hmm.
the fluctuations of these things,
Yeah.
and like that's what programming is all about, right? Is, we have these principles from the research, but like they're just general things that we have to look at the person, what's
Yes.
going on in their life, and tailor everything to them, which for people like us, that's obvious, right? Like that's the whole point of what we're doing.
It's
But
obvious, but most coaches, no, I shouldn't say most, but a good amount of coaches, new and long term, don't do it.
exactly, it blows my mind
Mm.
how many people are like, wow, dude, like thanks for like listening and like giving me like an individualized thing. I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you shouldn't thank me for that. That should be expected. That's what the job is.
Yes.
But yeah, man, I think that's probably how I would sum it up, is like using the research as the starting point, and then it's all about that personal relationship side of things. And of course, some people, are more open to that connection than other people, and that's
Yes.
fine. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to, share
Yeah.
details about their whatever. But
Each client has like different levels of how like, deep they want to go in the relationship,
yeah,
which is fine. Yeah.
for sure, for sure. But yeah, I think because then that kind of, if you're listening to the person and you're asking questions and you have that relationship, like that takes care of everything, right? Like
Hmm.
you care so much about them, like you're going to go out of your way to find the answer if you don't know it already. You're going to try, experiment with different things when something's not working or whatever, right? And you're going to naturally find the things that work over time. So it's also kind of simplifies the process, which is
Yes.
cool.
Yes,
But
100%, dude.
yeah.
That I say I love that you say that because that's kind of my theory. I have like a couple of like phrases I go back to. One is that programming is an art and a science. That's what makes it so fun.
Yep.
Obviously, being in research, you have more knowledge than most in the sense of like I'm relatively up to date and conducting stuff about what works. But as we know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, man, but it's like, exercise science research, one of the limitations is usually for at least from a hypertrophy strength perspective, is like not a crap ton of people generally, and for a relatively short amount of time. And so what we can say is that this protocol that we implemented may or may not have a somewhat benefit compared to, you know, the null or compared to whatever in this given time frame, in these given conditions for the average person. But
Mhm.
so we have outliers, we have high responders, low responders. It may not work for you, and you may not even like the way that it works, right? Research, you do it because it's what you signed up for as a research
Mhm.
participant, right? But that part where you said with relationships is also important. I always tell trainers that I mentor and supervise is like you can have a PhD behind your name, you can have the alphabet and certifications behind your name, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you can't help people with behavior change and actually showing up and enjoying the process, what's the point?
Yeah.
The
100%.
reason why I call them used car salesman trainers, the reason why they're so successful is because they are captivating, they're charismatic, they build the relationship, and you watch them do Bosu ball sit-ups for the last year, which whatever, but
Mhm.
their clients love them, and because they show up consistently, even if you have kind of a crappy program, you're probably going to see some progress,
Yeah.
and they're happy to go. So I think a lot of times coaches, like, we get caught up, and I've done this myself too, is like knowledge, 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 and I can out knowledge my client. And like, if I just show them the facts and like, this is how you program, this is how you do it, I don't need to do anything else. And then we forget the personal side of coaching or the personal side of personal training, right?
Yes. Dude, I could not agree with all of that more. And I've done the exact same thing, right?
Yep.
Like it's so easy to get caught up in that. I don't even want to call it a trap because it's like
No,
it's
I
not a
think it's like
bad
the natural
thing,
arc of it's like I use like an anime arc, right? It's like the arc of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
being a trainer. It's like first you're like, I don't know shit. Then it's
Yep.
like, oh, I'm starting to learn some stuff. Let me tell my client about every muscle in the body. And then it's like, oh yeah, none of that really matters when you're talking to
Yep.
a person. It's just like
Yeah.
this flow.
Yeah, it's like you have to, what is that called? Where you have to like learn, you're learning so much to the point where you think you know everything, and then all of a sudden you realize you actually don't know anything.
Yes.
Like you're like,
Yes.
oh wow, there's all this stuff I didn't realize. and then
Yeah.
it kind of corrects over time.
I use the quote by, I don't know what that phrase is, but I every first day of my ACE prep course that I teach, I show them the quote by Albert Einstein. It's like, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Mm,
And that's like
it's
my
true,
motto
man.
as a coach, man. It's like, get comfortable. Cause like first you start off not knowing anything, then you think you know everything. And then you realize, oh, wow. Like there's, especially with the human science, like there's a lot of gray areas. Things are always changing. I'm going
Yeah.
to have to deal with like the auto regulation and like the person in front of me that is not even in a research setting. You know, you're a research participant. Me being as a subject, I've even seen it. Like people come in as research subject. They're not robots. Like they have ups and downs. Like thankfully,
Yep.
you guys do very smart research design with a lot of auto regulation and things like that. But they're going to have things that throw off, research possibly,
Absolutely. And it's like that's literally why we have that. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? To help account for those things. Just because people have been doing research for so long and we've noticed those issues, right? So it's like, well, how do we, how do we get around those things? So yeah, man,
Yeah.
it's
I always tell that with coaches too. And that's why I'm like, you can use percentage based training in some instances, but it's like your client comes in and they're feeling like shit and their girlfriend just broke up with them. It's like, all right, I know we haven't tried 225 yet on bench, but you're doing it today. And then the bar's moving at like 0.5 speed. And,
yeah.
and you're like, maybe this isn't the best idea?
Yeah, you got to make those adjustments. You can, I don't know if you've had this experience. I certainly have. Coaching with my own training and also coaching people is like you can take that too far to where
Yes,
so much of it is by feel, and it's like, man, some of my best training sessions have been when I'm sick and in a bad mood.
that is,
Like,
that is true.
it's weird. So like you can go too far with the RPE stuff and I think this is one of the most valuable lessons I think I learned from Ryan was like sometimes you just need a little bit of brute in your training,
Yeah,
Like we
that's a good point.
yeah, like the we get too research focused and it's like too RPE focused, too whatever. Sometimes you just gotta work because at the end of the day, you said it, right? If people are showing up consistently and doing something that's challenging, they're gonna make some progress.
Yes.
Maybe it's not optimal progress, but something.
Yeah,
So at the end of the day, like we just gotta be in there working hard and all
that's
this
right.
we can fine tune, but yeah, man, we can't sabotage ourselves,
I like that too. I have those days, like we're all busy and like maybe you're not feeling your best, you're sore as hell from your last training session. You're like, I'm just gonna go through the motions today. And there's definitely days where you just do that, right? You're 4 hours of sleep, not feeling very good, whatever. But I'll catch myself and I'm like, are you just gonna like not try today? Or like,
Yeah.
I call it my inner bitch. I'm like, are you just gonna let that voice win? Like, that wasn't reps in reserve 3, brother. You need to buckle the fuck up, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, let's go. Let's take this for a ride. And then, like you said, sometimes you're like, that is really where I'm at today. But then other times you're like, wow, when I kind of ignored my subjective just for a moment in a respectful way, I
Mhm.
actually performed quite well today. And that is also like a nice little confidence boost for yourself, right? You're like, wow, I'm a little bit stronger than I thought. I'm a little bit more
Yeah.
capable than I thought I was previously.
Yeah, which is a great lesson, right? And I love that you said
Hell yeah.
respectfully too. Like, I think that's like just to underscore that because that's a very unappreciated thing. I feel like, um, I can't speak for. I don't think it's as prevalent in powerlifting, and then like other, disciplines, I guess. I can't speak to those as much, but like in bodybuilding, it's almost par for the course to just bulldoze all of your emotions,
Yeah.
and like it just it becomes this weird twisted thing where you're not even doing it for yourself anymore. You're trying to impress other people and you're just suppressing all of your
Yeah.
feel. And I'm like, what are we doing, man? Like, I think it's like you said, sometimes we have to reevaluate those subjective feelings, right? And see, like, is that actually how I feel? Let me like put that aside for a second. Let me just go for it
Yeah.
and try to see how it feels. Sometimes you still need to adjust, right? But
Absolutely.
being respectful and not just being, I think all of us have that little voice in our head that has that kind of masochistic, like, come on, are you like, do you really want to,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, you really want to take it easy? You're really that soft, whatever. I think a little bit of that is okay, right? But we
Yes.
can take that negative self-talk a little too far.
Yes.
And
100%.
especially in bodybuilding, that's just such a common thing. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
It doesn't
Got to have a
help.
good balance, man.
Yeah.
Definitely have to have a balance.
Yeah.
That's dope,
Well said.
man. Well, appreciate you taking some time to talk a little bit about coaching. Now, I want to spend kind of the rest of the time going into research. So, obviously, I'm going to chime in here and there, but this is your baby, so I want to, give you the opportunity to talk about whatever you want to and however deep you want to go about kind of the research studies that you're leading at FU in the Exercise Science Lab. Kind of, like what's the thinking behind them? What exactly are you hoping or looking to measure? And just kind of all the cool details, man. I would love to hear it.
Here we go. Okay, I'll try to be, I think I can be relatively concise at this point because I've tried to think this through without rambling too much. But so my dissertation study is now currently running. We talked a little bit before the call about how I got through my proposal successfully.
Yes,
Thank
congratulations
goodness.
again, man.
Um, so that now we're actually in data collection mode. So what I'm looking at is really ultimately it boils down to how do we fine tune how much volume we're doing. Volume super important for both strength and hypertrophy, but especially hypertrophy. It's one of the primary buttons we have to push, right? Um, we have the most recent meta-analysis being from 2017 from Schoenfeld et al. That, this is the thing that's always cited for like why volume is important, right? And it's like 10 plus sets per week is probably the way to go for most people. 10 plus sets is a big range, right? Um, so it's there's so much there, and there's so much room, like we've been talking about, to individualize things, because there's not much of this in the research at all yet. There's little hints here and there, but we know from coaching experience, different people need different amounts of volume,
Yeah.
right, to make their best progress, to recover, and all this stuff. So my project is like really inspired by coaching practice, right? And just I want to answer that question. I want to be like, well, how do I decide how much volume to do? It's not just 10 plus. Like I want to be able to have a way to figure that out. So we, I guess as a quick aside, we're working on an updated meta-analysis on the impact of volume on hypertrophy and strength. That'll be really cool. I'm very excited about that. We still have a little ways to go to wrap that guy up and be able to talk about results and stuff. But that's sort of bundled in with this too, just to update, just because more studies have been done, right? It's
Of course.
been 6-7 years, right? So we'll have that. But then my specific intervention is sort of broken into two pieces. So one
Okay.
of them is looking at, do we keep set numbers static in every session? We always do the same thing no matter what, or do we allow set numbers to change based on performance and recovery? It's like an auto-regulated set volume.
Got you.
Um,
So like you would
so
come in with maybe like an example like, hey, we plan on doing 3 today, but depending on these auto-regulated factors, we may go up or down in the session. We'll make that call that may be more beneficial for you in the moment.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Got you.
So the idea behind that is that, there is some research on autoregulation for strength. Seems beneficial for strength, right? Usually people can sort of match the training dose to how they feel that day. Lift heavier loads, lighter
Right.
loads, whatever. Makes sense.
Yes.
For hypertrophy, there's not very much, right? There's one study where they autoregulated load at the same number of sets, same rep
Mhm.
range. Didn't really have a benefit, which makes sense. Hypertrophy is not super load dependent, right?
Right.
So
I'm
makes
guessing that's
sense.
why a lot of coaches, like I've done this for myself, they program usually a rep range. So it's like, hey, I can keep load relatively consistent as long as
Yep.
I'm pushing close to the reps in reserve I want.
Yes,
Okay.
100%.
Gotcha.
I do the same thing. I think that's probably the best way to go based on what we know right now, right? But so we have that auto-regulating load didn't really seem to help that much. There's a little bit of stuff that's sort of looking at auto-regulating the reps per set. It's at the same load, right?
Mhm.
So for example, we have for the sake of easy math, 130 or 100 pounds.
Mhm.
I was going to say 135. That's not easy math. We're doing 100 pounds, and maybe we're planning on doing 10 reps, but these studies have used the barbell velocity to kind of help look at things. So they looked at, maybe based on the velocity, we stop the set early at 8 reps or 6 reps or whatever, or maybe we keep going to 12 or whatever it is. And because the load is the same, we're changing the reps per set, yes, but we're really changing the proximity to failure, right? Like we're
Yes.
changing how close to failure we get. So with that, they were finding the more reps per set that you do at the same load, the more hypertrophy you get, which makes perfect sense because we're getting closer to failure,
Right.
right? And we're seeing, Zach spearheaded that paper from our lab that's preprint right now, showing that in in general, on average, closer to failure tends to lead to more growth. So I'm like, if that's the case, why are we auto-regulating reps per set with velocity, whatever? Let's just program a certain RIR target and we're good to go.
Right.
So then the last piece is sets, right? And one study has tried to look at this, but it was only 3 weeks long. They didn't have any hypertrophy measures pre and post. It was like a proof of concept kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So I'm like, cool, well, let's do that, right? Like we know volume's super important for hypertrophy, but no one's looked at auto-regulating it to see if matching the training dose in that sense to how I feel today in my performance, whether or not that leads to better results. And then sort of what's baked into that, because it can change and because the thing that it's changing is sort of based on that person specifically,
Yeah.
the way that it goes up and down is tied to that person. So now we're getting a little bit at that individualized volume aspect, right? Somebody who
Yes.
recovers super fast and they maintain their performance really well across a bunch of sets, they're going to do more sets. Other
Yes.
people who just hit a wall really quick, they're going to do less sets,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know about you. This is actually, I'd be interested to hear what your experience has been. That like that fits pretty well with what I've noticed is people who have really high endurance, they maintain their performance really well.
Hmm.
Seems like we got to do some more sets. Other people who, they run out of gas really quick. All right. So just to kind of reiterate and recap that is, so basically we have this idea of changing the volume potentially session to session versus always doing the same thing. And to be clear, you mentioned this too. One of the limitations of research is the low number of subjects in most studies, right? So we in this study and just what we're doing pretty much always in our lab these days is what's called a within subjects design, where within the same person you have one limb, whether it's an arm or a leg or whatever, doing something, and the other limb is doing something else.
This is so
That
cool.
way, yeah, that way you effectively double your sample size, right? And we can sort of automatically control for genetic differences, lifestyle differences, because now if subject A is eating in a deficit and subject B is in a surplus, that could be a big problem comparing between the two people, but at least within the same person, it's the same in both limbs, so it's more fair comparison. We still try to control for that as best we can, but
Yeah. Yeah.
nonetheless, helps to kind of clean some things up. So that's sort of another little cool feature of it. But looking at that static set versus allowing the sets to change, does that allow for better growth, recovery, etc.? And then also kind of getting at that individualization aspect a little bit. And then the other piece of this is looking at some other potential ways to autoregulate volume. So the way that we're doing it in the study primarily is based on performance, right? Which is sort of tied to your recovery and, all of that. And essentially what they're going to have is a performance cutoff point. So they're going to do in their arm that's auto-regulating, they're going to do as many sets as it takes until they hit this cutoff point, and that's when they stop. So it might be
Okay.
more than last time, might be less than last time, might be the same amount, whatever. But in the field, there's other things that are kind of being done, to use this. And to be clear on those things and just the whole thing as a whole, credit where it's due, right? Mike Israetel is sort of the one who introduced this idea to the world of maybe we should think about changing set numbers as a way to sort of progressively overload and as a way to adjust the training dose that we're doing. And he over time has kind of evolved that idea. And then Steve Hall from Revive Stronger really pushed this thing further again, and also kind of brought his experience into it, and it evolved a little bit more and sort of became what I think is the current iteration of it, which is using various indicators, subjective and objective,
Hmm.
to adjust set numbers to try to hone in on things for that person while also adjusting for different things that happen in their life, right? Like we
Right.
said, super low recovery for whatever sleep, stress, etc. reasons. So credit to those guys for really pushing this forward, and I think that the ideas are very logical and very well reasoned out, and they seem to work pretty well in practice, but we just don't have research on it, right? So
Right.
that's what we're trying to do, is just see, when we go in the lab, can we get some data behind this, and maybe it supports it, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? We're gonna see. But yeah, so credit to those guys. But this, what I was saying, this other piece of the study is looking at some of these other little things that people are using to adjust those set numbers. So they do certainly use performance and recovery, right? Like what I'm doing. But what other people will use is things like your pump. Are you getting a good pump while you're training? For example, if you are training, let's say your chest, and you never get a pump at all,
Hmm.
that might be one of several indicators that might let you think maybe I can do more, right? Whereas if you get a crazy pump and then you keep going and it goes away, maybe that's we're doing too much.
Right.
Maybe, right? We don't know for sure. I think that would make some sense. but
Right.
that's generally how it's used in practice, right? And then we have like muscle soreness. Do you get sore like crazy and you're crippled and can't walk for 3 days? Maybe it's too much. If
Right.
you never get sore at all, maybe we could do a little bit more.
Hmm.
So things like that, right? That there's no black and white rules. They all need to be taken in conjunction with each other, right, to get the overall picture. But people are using these things. So along the way in our study, what we're going to do is collect all that data, right? We have people rate their pump after every set. We have people rate when they come into the lab, their like perceived recovery, and any soreness that's still left over. Then they're doing their session. We get pump after every set. They finish the workout, and we get what's called a session RPE, which is, rather than giving an RPE value for a certain set, like how difficult it was, it's how hard was that workout, right? So it's kind of getting into this idea of just perceived difficulty of the
Right.
thing that you did.
Yes.
Um, with the idea, of course, then being, if it's a 1 out of 10, maybe we could do a little bit more,
Hmm.
right? That sort of stuff. So we'll get that there. And then I'm also being very annoying and texting all the subjects the day after all of their sessions to get their soreness we're doing the bicep primarily, to get their bicep soreness the day after training, to kind of look at DOMs and any soreness like that. So just trying to gather all this information, and we won't be able to use those to auto regulate, right? Because there's no method for that that's sort of been fleshed out yet. But what we can do is we can look at the relationship between the trends in each of those things. So like the trend in pump, the trend in soreness,
Hmm.
etc., and look at the relationship between those and the long-term hypertrophy that they get. So the goal with that is that we can try to identify which of these things we should listen to the most, right? Like which of these things are related to hypertrophy, which ones are strongly related, which ones are really weak, to kind of help us to decide, like, what do I need to keep track of, right? If
Right.
soreness doesn't seem to be related at all, and perceived difficulty isn't related at all, but pump has a super strong correlation, right? Like that doesn't
Right.
mean that it's causing the growth, but it means it's related in some way, and we should at least be paying attention to it and potentially use it to help make some decisions. So
Right.
I'm really, really excited about both of those pieces, or really, I guess all three, if you consider autoregulation, individualized volume, and all these subjective indicator things. Like I was telling Dr. Zordos, my advisor, that like if I could do anything in the world for my PhD, it would be this thing. Like
That's
I'm
dope.
so excited. It's all the stuff that is it's this is especially for people who are only focused on hypertrophy, like hell or high water, I'm going to get maximal growth. For those people, this is how a lot of them are training these days in that sort of evidence-based sphere. Certainly not all of them, but a good portion. And it's how I like to do things. It's how I do things with a lot of my clients who have that goal. And I just want to know, does it make sense,
Yeah.
in a research perspective? And we'll have all the standard limitations and caveats of research, but I'm very excited to see what we find. And I think regardless of what we find, it's going to be interesting. Like
Yes.
there really, like there's no such thing as a useless finding in this kind of study, right? Like
It almost
regardless of
sounds
what
like
it
you're
is,
kind of
it's gonna be
building a
cool.
database of like subjective and objective experience at the very least.
That's a cool way to think of it. Yeah, and I think we'll have we're getting a lot of data, dude. We're getting a lot of data, and it's gonna be, if nothing else, we can have some sort of snapshot of, what do people seem to experience when they're training, and even just that is cool, right?
Yes.
It'll be like we're gonna have probably between 20 and 30 total subjects, which with the within subject design sort of reflective of,
Mm.
uh 50, 60 people, whatever. But that's still like there's what, 8 billion people in the world. So, it's still, big limitations with it. But nonetheless, even if all we get is the raw data set, still something interesting. So we can't lose. And but hopefully we find something super cool, and we take over the world and change how people program. That'll be cool.
I love it, man. I love it. So let me try and I always try and with things like this, do a refresher to make sure. And please correct me if I'm wrong as I'm going through here. So within subject design, which again, first and foremost, so brilliant, right? Especially for the hypertrophy side of things, where we hopefully don't see as much of a crossover effect like we would
Yes,
with like a power or strength development for an athlete, right? So
very good point.
within subject design, so that way I can see like, hey, one side of my body gets one protocol. You said it's bicep specifically. Okay,
Yep.
so looking to see, does the bicep work differently if I give them just a standardized, is it kind of like a linear progression kind of training? Like, hey, each week a set goes up or whatever it is for the one side?
It's So the sets are always the same.
Okay.
They're going to do 8 sets every workout. So
Gotcha.
it's quite a bit, right? But
Yeah.
the reason it's quite a bit is number one, it's in line with volume recommendations from the research, but also we wanted to make sure we didn't stack the deck against that, right?
Yes.
Like if I had them just do 3 sets and
Then
the
they
other
would,
arm's
it's like, oh, of
always
course,
doing a
this one
lot,
maybe grew more versus like, right.
right? It had to be in that zone where the changing arm might do more, might do less, might do the same. So
Gotcha.
anyway, not to
No, it's all
distract
good.
you
That's
from
a
the
very
point.
important point. So the one set side is doing the standard 8 sets across to make sure we try and get some kind of dose effect. And then the other side is getting the auto-regulated side. While they're going through that, you're also measuring some of these subjective and objective measures, things like soreness, pump, perceived recovery, etc. And then over time, when you measure both sides, you're trying to see if there is maybe a correlation or some kind of causal relationship between these factors and the growth that we are seeing on the effect on the auto-regulated side.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So the thing that we might be able to get some sort of like causal relationship would be the autoregulation or the changing sets. The subjective stuff we won't be able to say that, but we'll at least be able to say it's associated to this
Right, right.
degree or whatever, right? And I guess the other caveat I should probably mention is that in order to so this it's tricky in research, right? Because you're trying to control as many variables as you can.
Of course.
So one of those variables would, like we mentioned earlier, proximity to failure probably matters for
Hmm.
hypertrophy and strength, but for my studies for the hypertrophy. And to try to control that, you have options. Do we want to have people stop at a certain reps in reserve? Do we go to failure? And because people in general, on average, are pretty accurate with rating their RIR, especially close to failure, right?
Yes.
But not everybody's perfect all the time,
Right.
you know. So to help kind of control for that, we're just doing everything to failure.
That makes it
And we're
easy.
gonna, yeah, we're gonna adjust the load set to set so that we can keep the same rep range. So even like
I
the
see.
arm that's always doing the
Yes.
same, it's gonna be sets of 8 to 12 to
And if
failure
they
the whole
fall
way through.
above, if they go above that and they don't hit the RIR, we adjust the load accordingly by
Yep.
percentage. If they can't meet that, then we decrease by a percentage.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Gotcha.
So that's
That's so
that then
smart.
becomes the not my idea, but collective effort from everyone. But that then becomes another limitation, right? Of whatever we find, does that still apply the same way to someone who's not training to failure?
Right.
You
Right.
know, so I personally don't think it's that different. I think the same principles would likely apply, maybe a different magnitude. Um,
At least
but
both limbs are
nonetheless,
going the same direction, at least it sounds like.
yes,
So
yes.
that,
So
yeah,
yeah, but technically, we can't necessarily say it'll be the same if somebody usually trains with 2, 3 reps in reserve or
of
whatever.
course,
But
of course.
anyway, so we'll have all kinds of limitations, which is always fun. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what we come up with.
Now, for the side that is getting the auto-regulated sets, how are you determining the auto-regulate? Like, what's the factor that says we're going up in sets today or we're going down in sets today? And why'd you
It
choose that?
is, yeah. Oh, okay. That's a juicy question. So, um, we we determined the number of sets. How do I even explain? Okay, so in a pre-testing visit, they all came in and did a certain number of sets that we got that from when I mentioned earlier, we were doing an updated meta-analysis on the effect of volume on hypertrophy and on strength. But one of the what's called a sub-analysis that you can do, which is just looking at a specific little piece of that overall question, is the impact of per session volume on
Okay.
hypertrophy and on strength. So from that, I won't talk about the results yet, just to be on the safe side. But from that kind of informed this pre-testing visit that we did, where they did a certain number of sets, and we looked at how much their performance decreased across those number of sets. So
Gotcha.
as volume load, right? So because everything went to failure,
Hmm.
we can do the load times the reps that they did in each set and look at how that changes across the whole session. So for
Gotcha.
example, maybe somebody, their performance drops, their volume load on set one is, 200, and then their volume load on set whatever is 100, so they lost 50% of their performance. So then we did that for everybody, and everyone's is different. We pilot tested this ahead of time, and it seems quite different, right? Like a handful of us in the lab all kind of went through it, And it's some people lose 20, 25%. They maintain their performance really well. Other people lose 70%, right? They just tank.
Right.
And which is interesting, right? No,
Yes.
it's the same number of sets, but so everyone's a little bit different with how much performance they lose. So what we did is we took the mean of all of those performance decreases across everybody, actually across each limb in everybody, because they did it separately on each arm.
Mhm.
And we took that mean value, that's our cutoff point. And the reason it's the
Ah,
mean is because in that pre-testing visit, they lost a certain percentage of their performance, right?
right.
And that fatigue percentage, quote unquote, is sort of tied to that session. They did that many sets. And so if we had people do my original idea, which thankfully we all talked about it collectively and came up with a better version, my original idea was to use their individualized fatigue percentage as their individual cutoff point. And what that would do is that their fatigue percentage is tied to that certain number of sets. So like
Mhm.
their baseline performance outside of any auto regulation is going to be somewhat similar to that number of sets,
Right.
right? Because that was a normal, whatever. So if they're feeling particularly good, maybe they do a little bit more. If they're feeling particularly bad, maybe it's a little bit less, but sort of their baseline average is probably around that number. Whereas instead, this new version that we decided to go with is using the mean fatigue percentage across everybody, and now that's everybody's cutoff point. So what that means, people who had their individual fatigue percentage that's right around that mean, their baseline is going to be roughly that same similar number of sets, plus or minus some for auto
Right.
regulation. Other people, let's say somebody who just maintained their performance really well. They had a really low fatigue percentage, right?
Right.
For easy math, right? Let's say the mean is 50% and this person had 25%. They maintain their
Mhm.
performance really well. So for them, when I now tell them to stop at 50%, remember they lost 25% doing
Yes.
whatever number of sets of pre-testing. So when I tell them to keep going until they hit 50%, they're going to do more sets,
So
right?
it's almost like a double out of regulation, almost in a sense, because
Yeah,
they
kind
would
of.
have stopped quite early versus now they have to go a little bit further to get to the mean of the group.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And then on the other hand, let's say somebody tanked and they lost 80% of their performance. When I now ask them to stop at 50%, they're going to do less sets,
Yes.
right? So
Ah, okay.
that's kind of the piece that allows us to get at that individualized volume thing, because now that's on that one auto-regulating arm, right? That might do, that sort of middle number, might do
Mhm.
more, might do less based on how much they fatigue. But this other arm's always doing the same.
Right.
So now within that person, I can look at this arm's always doing 8. This arm, maybe I maintain my performance really well. So this arm's always doing like 12 or something, right? Or
Right.
whatever number it winds up being. So then which arm grew more, right? Did somebody who maintains their performance really well, does the higher volume limb tend to grow more, or does the
Mhm.
lower volume limb tend to grow more? So there's all these little analyses that we can do. But hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I know
No,
there's a
no.
lot of numbers, but um, using how much they fatigue across a certain number of sets, take the mean value of all of that. That's our cutoff point. So when we come in, we're going to do as many sets as it takes until we hit that cutoff point. We lose that much performance, measured as volume load. Then they stop. And
Gotcha.
I pilot tested this for a while myself before this was like a year plus ago, I think, when we were kind of coming up with the idea. And it seemed, which N of one, right? Just me, and I'm biased because I wanted it to work.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it seemed to track pretty well with my subjective experience, right? Days that I felt under recovered, I tended to stop earlier. Days that I felt really good, I tended to do more sets. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the weird one and it won't really work for other people, but I'm excited to see what happens.
Now I'm gonna try and articulate this. I'm getting this
Good
is
luck,
this.
bro. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
try. So can't say for certain, but it is possible that the arm that is going to do, let's say the auto-regulated arm does more volume compared to the non-auto-regulated arm. There is a chance there's going to be a greater hypertrophy response. There's a chance just because the
Sure.
volume principle, right? I'm guessing, is there, or I should ask, in the post test, when y'all compare the two sides, you're comparing the percent change in hypertrophy for each limb and then comparing that to the change in volume so that way they're stratified accordingly. So for example, it's like, hey, this side grew more. It's like, well, yeah, we did more volume. but the percentage of volume increase versus the percentage of muscle change, I can say, even though this one maybe got bigger than this one, percentage wise, maybe there's a difference that I can account for. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
we can definitely do. So we'll do a bunch of stuff. I
Okay.
don't even want to try to talk about all that stuff right now because we're also hashing all of it out still. But
No worries. No worries.
we'll analyze it in a lot of depth. There's a lot of what are called moderators, right? Like things that you could think of it like confounding variables, right? Things that could change the relationship between these things, right? Or change the outcome. So we'll look at all kinds of stuff and be able to see interesting things like that. And I think the other piece, just to make sure that this is out there this may not happen, but it's a possibility that for people, let's say they wind up one arm does more than the other one, right? Which I think is likely to happen, not all the time, but for, a fair amount of the time, that the arm that does less volume, if that one grows more, that's really interesting,
That would be
right?
interesting.
Because it's backwards from the sort of expected relationship. But then to me, like that's the individualized stuff, right? Like the
Of
group
course.
level thing we would expect is more volume leads to more growth. But within a certain person, maybe this other arm is just doing too much, right?
Yeah. And even though it's
Whereas the
auto
other one,
regulated, it still might be like, hey, you're just kind of at capacity.
yeah. So I'm excited. Those people who tend to have their performance tank and are going to stop at fewer sets.
Mhm.
I'm really excited to see, do those people tend to grow more from doing fewer sets compared to doing, the group level average recommendation.
Yeah.
That's going to be cool.
This isn't
Maybe they
so.
don't, but
This is interesting for like speaking N of one, like you said, anecdotally for myself. So I have been for the last couple of years doing hypertrophy specific training for myself, mixed in with strength and conditioning for I like to play basketball, do jujitsu, etc.
Mhm.
Anecdotally, what I find, I thankfully have, thanks to you guys being in the lab, found out how to get to a good intensity. Doesn't it seems that, and I am more so, I would say, just genetically, my physiology leans more towards endurance. It's a weird thing, endurance and power, specifically like body weight power. So like I can run very fast, I can
Mhm.
jump very high, I can cut very well. Um, and I can also do things like run a mile, run a 5K very efficiently, and it's easy. Even if I don't do it very often, I can get back to conditioning very easy.
Mhm.
Resistance training, specifically in a hypertrophy, also in a strength contest, but hypertrophy training is very, very difficult for me. My performance tanks, I would say, pretty substantially, set to
Mhm.
set, depending on the exercise. But I also realize in order to grow, I also need a lot of volume. Because if I don't, I know it's like the worst. So it's like if I only do like, maybe 3 or 4 sets, maybe, twice a week, it's definitely not going to cut it. Or even I get close to like that 10, it's not going to cut it.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just like it's hard and grueling no matter how long I do training for my chest or for my arms or for my quads. It's so grueling to go close to failure and to get the adequate volume. And I'm like, fuck, man, it's in a weird spot. So I'm curious, like hearing what the eventual results of this are. It's like maybe if I try an auto regulation day to day, set to set, would that have more of a benefit, or is just like, nah, you're just gonna have to push regardless? But
Yeah, and honestly, even if that's what we find, that's interesting, right? If we
yeah,
just find out that our feelings are a lie and we should just, always
yeah,
push through,
yeah,
that's good to
yeah,
know.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, like it's one study, right? So we shouldn't, uproot everything that we do based on one study. Unless it finds something really cool, in which case make me famous. Let's all use my study.
yes,
But no, I'm joking, of course. But yeah, it'll I can't wait, dude. There's gonna be so much cool, interesting things. Hopefully. I think the trick with it that we've learned, this is sort of another research thing, right? Is like the measurement is everything. Because maybe something is happening, we're just not picking it up because our measurement isn't good enough.
mm,
So like we put a lot of time and effort into improving our ultrasound measurements. You can probably remember when you did a study with us,
yeah, yeah,
our ultrasound was not very good, right? It was we did the best we could with the equipment that we had access to, but there's just higher quality stuff available now, right? And we are lucky enough to have a higher quality ultrasound machine now that it just works a little bit better in and of itself. But a lot of it is on us too to make sure that we are very consistent and we're controlling everything as well as we can. So like, for example, I'm doing 100% of the ultrasound scans for my study, right? So it's always the same person because
yeah,
different people might have slightly different pressure on the skin or whatever, right? And it's just there's so many little things that I didn't know impacted results of a study until I tried to do it and realized, oh wow, these measurements are so crazy inconsistent. We just can't say anything,
Yeah.
right? Maybe something happened, maybe it didn't, but we just don't know because the measurements are all off. So it's a lot of time and care going into like measuring specifically where we're going to take that ultrasound scan on their arm and keeping that really consistent. And then, the scan itself, having absolute minimal pressure on the skin and the
Hmm.
angle of the ultrasound, like all these little things that, is another potential wrench in finding cool stuff. But we're going to do our best, man.
Yeah, the
Because it
ultrasound
matters a
thing, I
lot.
didn't realize how it's funny. My grandmother, she's a echocardiogram technician, so she does echoes on the heart and the certain blood vessels all day. But then getting to watch Josh a couple times last semester do it, I never realized like until you see someone do it how technical it has to be to like
Yeah.
get like a smooth picture, one that isn't
Oh,
jagged, one
man.
that gets to
It's
the
tough.
right part of the muscle that you're looking at. Like it looks very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else, it takes practice, right? But it's it's tricky, man. We've spent a lot of time in there just practicing on each other and trying to get a good handle on it. But
Yeah, man.
yeah.
Well, I'm excited for, to hear eventually when the study does come out and get published. I'm very excited to hear the results. And, hopefully, like you said, maybe there's some cool things we can take away, or at least to some other cool conversations in future research, man. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to kind of like share about like, your baby and what you're doing, man.
Yeah, thank you for letting me do it, man. I love talking about it. It's this is my life for 2024, right? Is just dealing with this study. And then the first half of 2025 at least, right? With writing the paper and doing my defense eventually, right? And then we got to actually write the paper to try to publish. And
Yes.
there's going to be a whole lot off of this project. So, but at least for now, it's fresh enough, and I'm not completely tired of thinking about it. So it's fun to talk about, and I appreciate you letting me kind of, ride your coattails on this platform a little bit to talk about it to new people.
Heck yeah, man. Let the people know where they can find you. Anything you want to plug, social, anything you do with coaching, anything like that, man.
Yeah, thank you. So the probably the best place to find everything is my Instagram. It's just jake.datadriven strength, all one word. And on there you can see, all the content that I put out on that. The hashtag link in bio has, the coaching info. It's got the a link to a nutrition course that we put together that was a little over a year ago now. I think that came out that I'm very, very happy with, especially people who are interested in strength but still want to dial their nutrition in, which I think is sort of a population that often could get more out of their training if they, work a little bit more on their nutrition. So that was sort of the driving force for making that course, and I'm very proud of how that came out. And we've gotten some really good feedback on that. So you can check that out if you're interested. Um, like I said, coaching stuff is in there. Otherwise, just trying to be, as active as I can on there. And, I like to try to talk to people. And I've been doing a lot of like, Q&A stuff on my stories and stuff. It's fun, and people ask some cool questions. And whether it's about research and training or just let me talk about fun, they ask me what kind of swords I like or whatever. Like that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that kind of
yeah.
thing. So yeah, man, that's probably the best place to find me. That's where I'm on the most. I haven't really tried any of the other social media stuff, to be honest. It's just, Instagram's enough to keep up with, I think. But
Yes.
but yeah.
That's cool, man. I'll be sure to put all his links below. And kind of like Jake said, he has been doing more recently of like those Q&A style. And if you couldn't tell by this podcast, this handsome fellow is a very kind guy and responds to a lot of cool questions. So be sure to follow him if any of this information or anime in general is interesting to you. Y'all know where to find your boy here, right? It's theshiftmethod.org. That's where we got all of our services. You click any of those take action buttons, it'll send you to a Google form. I'll get in contact with you as soon as possible if you got any coaching inquiries. Again, we have the newsletter that comes out every month. So if you want to learn more about my life, about content that we have coming out, like podcasts like this or the YouTube videos, be sure to just put in your name and your email once that pops up in your window. We also have, of course, daily content we got on Instagram and YouTube Shorts. So be sure to check that out at the_shift_method. And as always, appreciate y'all for taking the time to listen. Hope y'all enjoyed. Jake, thank you so much again, brother. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. All right.
Thanks, man. You too.
Later, everyone.